Welcome back, folks. Today I have a special guest, Miss Emily Gindlesparger, a newer friend, relatively speaking. So we've known each other for 2-ish years, would you say?
I
Is that
think it's
accurate?
only been one, actually,
Okay.
one and change. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
seems longer.
But we
That's
packed a
part.
lot in. Yeah.
Exactly. I was just say we had the pleasure of meeting through the wonderful group of Brave Leader, led by our friend, Mr. Philip McKernan. And the time that we've had, which has been short but profound, makes me think we've known each other longer than we have. So yeah, wow, only a year. Um, and that's actually all I'm gonna say before I allow you to introduce yourself. So who is Emily Gindlesparger?
Well, it's always hard to sum that up, of course, for any
Yep.
person. But professionally, I am a book coach, a ghostwriter, and I run a memoir academy alongside my co-founder, Tucker Max,
Hmm.
which tells you actually a lot about me personally, too, which is that I just geek out insanely at watching people develop their stories inside of themselves and develop their sort of life's work, their body of work, and have obviously I've devoted my career to helping people with that. And I'm a writer myself as well, and a hiker, a mountain biker. I'm a big nature
Mm.
person. Um, I would say those are probably the two strongest upfront things about me.
Yes, yes. Most of which I knew. And aside from some of our really cool discussions around the professional work you do, which is awesome, and you've even given me a little bit of insight as I stumble into my early phase of wanting to write a book. But I also recall some of our discussions around the outdoors and nature. And so I have to check in because I think we talked about you wanting to live a bit further from the city. Is that a priority or is that still in the distance?
It's still in the distance.
Okay. Yeah.
Partially, actually, this is kind of like an interesting dilemma that I think a lot of people face. Is like where I want to live is not where my people are.
Mm.
And so right now, the trade-off for sure is in staying with my people. And I
Hmm.
feel strongly about that at the moment. And I'm just kind of like sitting, waiting for the right waiting to get the right feeling about a place to make the leap to build a new community elsewhere. So,
That's cool. You know what that reminds me of? And I don't think I've ever actually talked about this, but my wife Gabrielle loves this song. I believe it's by Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors. And part of the song, the chorus is, you got to find your people to find yourself.
hmm.
Now, I find that fascinating because I think the I think that lands with me big time because on my journey, especially in this season of life, people have made a huge impact and changed the trajectory of my interests, my passions, my all kinds of things. But then I also think that the younger version of me would argue the opposite. Like, do you know who your people are if you don't know yourself? And it almost becomes this chicken before the egg type conundrum, you know? But I think it's so important you use the word community. It just keeps showing up. And I think it's evolving now, like post-COVID, well post-COVID, but it's how we came together from a smaller
Yeah,
community, right?
yeah, that's right.
Okay, so nature always in focus for you. Writing, we're gonna get into that for sure. I think the way I'd like to ask into that is where did it start? Like, where did you start with writing? And perhaps take that anywhere you want, but perhaps that involves into some of the awesome work that you're doing today.
For me, it's always been in my life. Like even before I couldn't write myself as a kid, I remember having, like my mom and like older kids ghostwrite
Yep.
stories that I wanted for me, like I would dictate to them. Yeah, no, I've just always been really drawn to the magic, what truly feels to me like the magical power of language, but of writing in particular because you can write something down and transmit it to people, not just from brain to brain, but across time. Like that's just, it's just so fascinating.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think I've never had a very mechanical mind, which many of the people in my family have, like they're builders and my brother's an architect, that
Mhm.
sort of thing. And so I think there's part of me that developed the language skill as a contrast to like, okay, well, I clearly can't do very well what what these people do,
Mhm.
but where can I lean in the other direction and really let what I love become uh the thing that I also focus my craft on.
Mm. Yep. Yes. It's interesting you mentioned as a child that you would take your stories to them. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, do you remember how you would ask people to, um, I think you said to ghostwrite for you.
Yeah, I mean that's the word that I use now.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't have used that word as a kid. Um, I mean, I think it started with there was some project in like when I was in kindergarten, there was some project that the grade schoolers were doing where they would come visit us into kindergarten and pair up with a kid and write down a story that the kindergartner told. And
Mm.
I think I latched onto that and was like,
Yeah.
that's cool. So like I can't do this myself yet, but I can get other people to do it for me. That's great.
Totally. And then can you recall, did you craft, let's just call them books or stories? Like, did you start crafting them as you,
Oh yeah.
okay.
And books
Yeah.
specifically. Like I
Mm.
wasn't just interested in writing, I was also interested in making
Mm.
physical books, both as a kid, but then even as a teen and in my 20s, I would do a lot of like actual book binding, like art book binding,
Yeah.
because there's just something very meditative about taking all those materials and pulling them together and like sewing the pages, and it balanced out what is otherwise totally in my head and gave me something to do with my hands.
Right. Yes. Ah, that's so cool. I have to reflect that my daughter Seppi had just turned 7, and I would argue that she has a lot of the creative side that I embody, that you also embody as a writer and an artist. And she's always making books. And it's funny, Emily, if I dug up some of the stories that she's written, like I could they're all over the house if I were to just kind of peek in different shelves and where we stash such things. But like in the early days, it's just this scribbling.
Hmm.
So she would just scribble and there'd be a story and then she'd come read it and it'd be so fun to read it with her because like she'd change it each time a little bit. But now it's like she has introvert tendencies like me where she'll just put her head down and go create. And like an hour later, I'll be like, what are you doing? And she'll like hold up like 10 pages stapled together with a cover, with pictures, with real words now and sentences. And the way she reads, actually, she reads into books with pronunciation. I'm noticing this because my son has his own talents and that's not him. Like, he's like, cool, I'll read the book. I have no desire to make one, but he does make his own unique art. So it's fascinating. I think that if we watch children or if we could rewatch ourselves, the way that you craft, write, and create like has to carry through. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
To
Yeah.
this
For
adult
some
world.
reason it reminds me of there's this I think it was the National Museum of Scotland, if I'm getting the right museum. Um there's an exhibit there that is like artifacts from pre-literate Celtic societies. And so there's just like these objects with scrambled letters on them. And
Mhm.
the display tells you that like they were created by people who could not themselves read and write, but
Right.
they knew how to draw the letters and they believed that there was like magic in these specific figures because, of course you see people being able to do stuff because they're reading things and like unlocking all of this knowledge. So
Yeah.
yeah, in a very real way, it is a magical talisman.
Yes.
But I just thought that was so cool. Like even just the form of it beyond the actual transmission of the lesson was still important to people even way back then.
Indeed. Yep. We share that for sure. Yeah, I was just sharing with you before we hit record that we got back from a nice family adventure to Hawaii, and in learning about their culture, symbols meant a lot in Polynesian culture and how they told stories. Writing was definitely a form of it, but it's so much of this magic is rooted in storytelling. So let's lean in further there. To fast forward, you help people craft memoirs and essentially write their story.
Mhm.
How did that to bring us to the more recent version? How did that evolve as your relationship with writing and storytelling evolved?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've always been interested in telling my own story. Even when I was like in my 20s getting started in writing and publishing, I wrote for magazines and I was
Mm.
constantly like being what is in essence a really bad magazine writer because I just wanted to write about myself. And it was like try to take the agenda of whatever the magazine actually wanted and just like squeeze it in there. Um, but yeah, it's always been a drive for me. I think it's a pretty basic drive for a lot of people to just be seen and heard as you
Mm.
are, whether writing is the tool that you use to do that or not. And and I didn't in the end make any money back then writing my stories. So I
Mhm.
pivoted to other more lucrative stuff, which was
Mhm.
like learning how to ghostwrite, learning how to help people with bodies of work that they could make a business case for,
Mm, yeah.
right? It's much easier to collaborate on a project when you know what outcome you're actually aiming for
Mhm.
and what tangible, concrete benefit you can get out of like a book that will teach a bunch of people and bring you a bunch of new clients and whatever the case. And that is still very, very valuable. And I still do that work. But more and more, the thing that I most love to help people with is the part that feels on the surface much less productive, but much
Mm.
more internally connected.
Mm.
And I've seen now from coaching people on writing their stories time and time again that often we think we know what our story is about. And through the process of writing it down for ourselves, but then also through the process of being witnessed with like an editor or a writing community, there's always more hidden in that story than we thought at first and that we can find on our own, even in a lot of cases. Like I told you I was just in New Orleans this past weekend, and that was for the Memoir Mastermind group. We had our first live meetup, and it
Mm.
was so amazing.
Yes.
Um, and for two people in particular, which I won't share their specific stories because those are theirs, obviously, but for two people in particular, they brought stories to read because we were reading in the group and then having discussion on each piece that we heard. And they told us all, well, I picked this piece because it felt safe. It felt like this is the piece that um, I feel like I wrote well, but it's like whatever emotion is here, I've already processed it. I'm done with it. That's fine. And so I brought it to the group because reading in front of people is scary, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And in both of those cases, it's like once we as the group started reflecting back to that writer, we realized that there were whole doorways, like just these really big pieces that weren't in the story yet, but could blow the whole thing much more broadly open. And
Mm.
both of those people left, I think, feeling the good kind of overwhelm that is like, oh, there's a lot
Yeah.
of work to do next, and I know which doorway to walk through. But I tell that story because that's in essence like that's what I'm always really excited to see. That's the moment that keeps me in this work because it is so cool to see people discover like rediscover what they know and
Mm.
articulate to themselves what they know. Um yeah.
Mm. That's real. That's very real for me for a variety of reasons. The first is that I believe that what you're pursuing is far more than book writing. It is
Hmm.
authentic storytelling, which is a reflection of our real lives, our vulnerability. Use the words like some people said safe, they want to hide. And I don't think a lot of books are written that way. A lot of books, to your point, are written with more of and I don't love this word, but an agenda that this is what I want to teach or explain, especially nonfiction books. Fiction is a different world. But and I sense it's funny, I sense that. That's why I was saying what you shared was so real. When you shared some of your resources with me to support me in thinking about writing my book, I immediately felt a little bit of overwhelm because I'm like, oh shit, I gotta tell the story. And I
Yeah.
knew like if this is gonna be real for me, it's gonna go into places that I've explored and then I'm probably gonna have to explore more. And then I want to map back to what something really cool I observed in you when we had a cool in-person Brave Leader experience was you used this great term I'll never forget that you were embodying being an emotion hunter,
Oh, I forgot about that. Thank you
right?
for reminding me. Yeah.
Yes. And
That was, yeah.
I'd never heard someone say that. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating because as you know, I've played in the world of emotional intelligence. I like that world because it helps me find more clarity in how I operate and regulate and all the human experience. And when you were just sharing what you shared, I was like, oh, she's definitely using that talent, that awareness to bring the real story, which has to be tied to emotion in some way,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
So that's so cool. And I can only imagine what magic happens when you get these courageous people in a room and you just ask them the real questions like, yes, and like what else is in there, you know?
Yeah.
And is that a
Yeah.
common pattern with the work that you're doing that do people shift and then realize, oh, dang, now I know what I'm doing now that Emily has kind of guided me in different ways?
Oh, yeah. And, I can't actually I can take credit for asking good questions, but I can't take credit for like where people find inside of themselves, right? Like that is always coming
Sure.
from within
Right.
and such an honor to be part of.
Hmm.
But yeah, Tucker and I often talk about how what we do is it's really more, it's a therapeutic process for sure.
Right.
Writing your story is always a therapeutic process. And so what we do is actually much more coaching,
Hmm.
and the writing is just the modality that we use to do it.
Mm.
And the really beautiful thing about that is that, life coaching, for example, can be so open ended. And so, like, I've certainly been part of experiences where we start one place and the energy just kind of starts to like scatter and get diffuse. And then you get kind of confused and overwhelmed for a while, and it takes a while to come back.
Right.
And when what we're doing is a process of uncovering someone's emotional life and what matters to them through the context of their story,
Hmm.
then there's always the right kind of size container to hold that focus and hold the direction in a way that is so beautiful. There's are you familiar with James Pennebaker,
No.
the sociologist?
Mm-mm.
He is really famous for doing all of these sociological studies on journaling. There have been over 400 of these. I can't remember how many Pennebaker did himself, but he wrote a book called Expressive Writing, where he talks about that research. And he said that over the course of these journaling studies, what they found was that when people wrote about the most difficult or complex or just the parts of their lives that they felt most confused about and had the biggest emotions, they experienced really incredible mental and physical health outcomes
Mm.
in the weeks and months, and even I think years after doing these journaling exercises. And Pennebaker said that what was really interesting and took him years to understand was that people who would come in with a fully formed, beautifully told story, they write it out and it's just cohesive and logical and it all makes sense and they can do it in all one go. Those people actually didn't have the same benefits as
Mm.
people who came in with a story that they didn't yet understand. And he said that there was something very important in terms of the benefits later. There was something very important about constructing the story with that space of journaling that creates all of this. It creates self understanding for sure, but even self understanding can change. The way that we think about a story in our lives can change
Yep.
over time
Mhm.
and constantly does. But being able to kind of like piece cause and effect together and construct, like, how am I feeling on the inside versus how am I acting in the world, even if that story is going to change later in hindsight, that
Yep.
process is so very important for helping us get a sense of what feels real to us and where we are in the world and where we are inside of ourselves.
Yes. It's funny and powerful that something that I'm just going to make a bold statement that will always exist in human society is storytelling. And it goes
Hmm.
so far back. Like we talked about earlier, we were sitting around a fire a couple years ago at one of the adventure retreats I led. And I asked the question, what do you guys think people would be doing right now 100 years ago? We're in this remote off-grid cabin, sitting around a fire, and like some fun, playful answers come up. And I go, you know what? I'd be willing to bet anything they'd be telling stories right now.
Hmm.
And in 100 years, assuming that these devices don't completely take over our attention, I think we'll still be telling stories in some way, you know? And what I filter among out of the work that you're doing, the way that you support people, and not to in an one thing in out of many things is that you're just helping curate more authentic stories, real stories that have depth and not just the surface level. Because that's one of the things we were talked about earlier too. Like I haven't been reading as much because I went through a really intense reading cycle in my early 30s, and now I feel like I read a lot of the same thing. It's just people using different words. But a great story lands differently, where I actually learn a lot about myself through that lens of reading someone's story. And that shows up a lot for me. So if I'm imagining like dreaming like about like being in an environment with people who are immersed in writing their memoirs, their stories, I have to believe I'd learn so much about myself just being in that container, you know?
Oh yeah. I mean, a well the you can tell the difference between a well-told story and one that isn't because a well-told story lets you experience that part of a life.
Hmm.
Like it's not just that you are hearing about it, you're inside of it and your
Mm.
senses are attuned to all the things that the writer is paying attention to, right? Like it's one of the reasons that stories are so powerful for teaching
Hmm.
lessons
Hmm.
is that it actually lights up more of the brain than a textbook, for example, like more than rote information does because of the experiential aspect, because we're actually experiencing that story inside of our bodies,
Hmm.
not just through our logic.
Totally. Totally. You know what else I wanted to acknowledge? So I feel like you give more of a master class on people embodying their story and going through the pattern, the motions, the process of really owning it and being with it. Whereas one of the tools I've used in the past and some of the self-discovery coaching I've done is I actually, before I begin deeper work with people and understanding who they are, I ask them to write their story. And I give them very loose constraints and boundaries. So in other words, I don't tell them it has to be this long, but I do say, let's not exceed 5 pages because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed in writing like a true
Mhm.
memoir. But I also give them very loose parameters, which is contextual to the person, but normally in like I don't tell them where to start. I just ask them to finish today where you are now. And it's fascinating because some people go all the way back. Some people will start in their teenage years or their professional years, which is super common with entrepreneurial people. And what they include, who they include, is so fascinating to me. Where like you could spend months just looking at that. But does that come up for you as well? Like when you guide someone into a personal narrative, like a memoir, do you give them more boundaries and constraints? Like we want you to start here, or do you kind of give them some space to say, where are you going to begin?
Tons of space.
Okay.
In fact, we really only ask one question to help people solidify what their memoir is going to be about. And that question is, what part of your life do you want to get honest about?
Mm,
That's it.
dang. Okay. That's a
Like we
that's a
used to
big
teach
one.
it in a bunch of different ways. I think there are many different ways to look at it. Like classic storytelling workshop ways to look at it would be to say, well, every story has a change in it, and so
Yeah.
what's the transformation? What's the beginning, middle, and end of that? But honestly, I think that putting all of that writing structure onto the task takes us out of the therapeutic process of it
Mm, yep.
sometimes. And you can get writing structure back, but if you start with structure and craft and trying to make the story, technically good, it is much harder to get the heart back in it later. And
Mm.
I know that from personal experience. Like I'm actually working on that with a book that I'm writing right now, where I'm struggling so hard because the foundational imprint of it was a much more tightly structured thing that I now need to let go of. And I'm struggling with how.
Mm.
But starting with what do you want to get honest about
Mhm.
gets you to that story I was talking about with Pennebaker. It gets you to the story that you still have yet to construct.
Right.
And it gets you to the part where the most transformation for you right now is likely to happen through your writing process.
That's cool. Which I would argue is what can support others the most as
Hmm.
reading and listening, learning from the story. Oh man, I have to pause because I know there's different things I want to ask, and I'm regulating on how far we go into some of this stuff because it's fascinating. One thing that comes up, which may not be a deep path to take, but in part of this process, do you suggest or lean into the hero's journey model?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Um, the sometimes being I lean into it when it's helpful,
Hmm.
and I stay 1,000 feet away from it when it is likely to get somebody in their head trying to think through
Ah,
their story logically. That's when
cool.
it's not helpful, right? Um, when it's really helpful is when either in the story someone has written or in the process that you see them going through as they are writing, you can tell that they're like at that foundational final battle point of the
Hmm.
hero's journey.
Hmm.
And when they are there, that's the place where they're most likely to give up on their story, to lose faith in this
Yep.
as a process, to feel overwhelmed and just feel like I can't keep going because this is too much, right? Which can be valid too. But when they're in that space, that's when I find it helpful to point out to them, like, this is where you are in the hero's journey. And if you step back from this challenge now, which you absolutely can, right? There's no rush to any of this. You step back from this challenge now, and it will be one of it'll be one of the earlier trials and challenges.
Yep.
You embrace this now, and you have an opportunity to face inside of yourself the thing that makes this the biggest challenge, and to actually work through it in a genuine way. And that was certainly what happened when I wrote my first book, which was all about a very messy part of my romantic life, and just like a huge entanglement of relationships that I'd gotten into, and trying to stand up for that story, deciding to publish it was such a crazy tipping point, because I could have just backed down and been like, I wrote that story for myself, which is true.
Mm.
And thus I don't need other people to read it to complete the therapeutic process that I needed for me. But because part of the story itself was about getting more honest in myself and getting more honest with people in my life, and actually standing up for my experience and what I need. Publishing then was like, it was like the big boss of that. Like it was the final level.
Mm.
And so it was so important to embrace that and push through it for me, not because I wanted other people to read it necessarily, but because that shying away from that degree of visibility, it was important for me to figure out why I was doing that and what I needed to push through.
Totally. Wow. Yeah, I was formulating this thought as this conversation grows that does a real story always require courage? And I want to say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I can tell you 100% it does.
Mm.
Like the safe stories that I was just talking about that people brought, right? Like sometimes you don't realize that it's going to require courage.
Right.
Sometimes you think, I know this story, I know this part of my life, I know myself very well, and that can all be true. And yet, the more that I see of people working through that internal process, the more that I'm convinced that a story kind of only ever comes up because your psyche wants to do something more with it.
Mm.
And usually the more that it wants to do is like completely unconscious. Like, so you can dive in to tell a story that you have told 1,000 times, and you're probably still going to find something new because the psyche brought that up to try to help you make a connection between what's going on with your
Right.
life right now. Yeah.
Yes. That's cool. So this is kind of a shift, but related to the creative process and writing and storytelling. Where do you get the most inspiration to tell the most real story? Is there an environment to give you a little bit more precision with my question? Is there an environment or a way of being where you're like, ooh, this flows through me, or does it happen a different way? Is it communal, being surrounded by people that can support you?
Both, for sure. You know, my first answer to that question is for me is meditation.
Mm,
I don't think everybody works this way because people are tuned differently and
mm,
meditation lands differently for different people. But for me, meditation is a big part of my writing practice because I can very, not so much now, actually, the more that I've meditated, which is great because it means it's working. But it used to be that I could get so easily flooded with fears of
mm,
like, how am I supposed to tell this story well? Who's going to read it? What will they think? Blah, 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 blah. Just endless, right? And sitting down and just getting quiet and asking, okay, but what really wants to be told? Not
mm,
even why or how I'm supposed to do it, but just what. Um, that always for me brings up some really clear memory or some really clear vision, meaning like I can see the scene in front of me, and then that's what I sit down to write. And so I lean on that practice all the time to try to fuel what I'm going to write each day. The community aspect of it is less about, for me, well, no, that's not true. I was going to say it's less about generating ideas, but that is, it can be, and I'll get to that in a second. I think one of the first important functions of community when you're trying to create is validation and
mm,
witnessing,
mm.
right? Like having people actually see as you're trying to pull stuff out from inside of you, whether they care about it or react, you know, like regardless of their reaction, as long as there's a compassionate witnessing to it, I
Yeah,
think
right.
that that always helps give some ego stabilization. Like it just really helps us feel more fueled to make more of that.
Hmm.
And then as in the example of like the safe story where you find a doorway that then is suddenly there's so much more, I think community has a huge capacity to do that for each of us as well because we are self-reinforcing systems. Like we're
Mm.
going to keep telling the stories that we feel safe enough to tell, and so we need kind of some of those outside influences to knock on the edges and knock stuff loose sometimes.
Totally. Yep. It's so well said. And something I want to bring more focus to that you mentioned was a quiet space. So I have a similar morning practice where almost every morning I touch the earth outside with my bare feet. I do some breath work, and it's pretty sacred to me at this point, you know. And I check in some days I don't do it, especially if it's 0 degrees and I'm like, damn, it's gonna be
Mm.
cold stepping on that earth. But what that is, if I abstract everything away that I want to complicate it with, is it's quiet time. And it sets the tone for me to be creative throughout the rest of the day in all kinds of ways. Additionally, where I find my whole system, my nervous system, my ego, everything overwhelmed is when I'm in really noisy environments and I have an intention to do something, to create something. And this shows up as a father, it shows up as an entrepreneur, it shows up in just moving through the world. Like, I don't like a lot of noise. I'm realizing that more and more. There's such a beautiful peace and learning through awareness when I have quiet space. And so I can't even fathom trying to write a great story that I deeply believe in and really showed up for without lots of quiet time, as an example.
Hmm. I mean, writing practice itself is quiet time,
Mm,
right? At least, or at least it is solo, internally focused time. Yeah,
yes.
always. Hmm.
Yes. And the community part you mentioned, just to kind of reinforce those thoughts. I've experienced that in so many great in-person experiences being witnessed. You nailed it, with compassion.
Hmm.
Because the opposite can have a whole different effect. If someone's judging and it's not an open environment, it's a more closed environment. Like then it's like, shit, maybe I shouldn't have shared this. And like that can have a spiraling effect. But most of my experience has been compassionate, and it just lends towards, I feel like so often we're experiencing a collective truth, resonance, whatever words you want to interject when we really hear and see someone showing up like, ah, it's real for me too. You're just courageous enough to say it. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
It's a
human
beautiful
experience.
aspect. It's also really amazing to see too, like in this writers retreat that we just came from. Actually, there was someone who heard one of the stories in the room, had been writing his book about something completely different, like early childhood memories, and heard this story from someone else in the group. And we have a discussion about the story, and he's just sitting like literally in the corner, quiet. He's got his arms folded, he's just kind of like really pulled back from the group. And then at the very end, he was like, I gotta say something. That story just unlocked like a really powerful story from 10 years, as an adult 10 years ago, that I realized that I have been avoiding.
Mm.
And he left that session. We all went out to dinner. He left early after dinner, went back to his hotel, wrote the entire story, and
Oh, wow.
brought like I think it was 3,500 words. We're talking like
Dang.
about 10 pages or so, 8 to 10 pages, and read that the next morning.
Ah, that's cool.
So there's such a huge um, there's such a huge effect that happens when we see one person being courageous,
Mm.
that up levels the degree of safety the rest of us can feel, and the degree that we want to stretch ourselves.
That's so
So
cool.
huge.
Indeed. Okay, sweet. I have one more, maybe I was going to say one more big question, but big is just my illusion. The question that I think you've mostly already answered, but if there's any final thoughts here, it's what do you really want to help people with? And this is a new question, so I'm going to give you some
Mhm.
space to be with that. I haven't asked this question anymore, and as I was thinking about new content to bring to the podcast, to my curiosity, and me even owning that, I'm like, ooh, that's not a it it doesn't feel easy. So I'm not applying, now I'm just talking too much. I'm not applying any pressure, but I like that question because it forces us to get honest, like you've talked about. So it's the perfect question for you. And so I'll digress. And what do you really want to help people with?
Oh, I have a very immediate answer.
Cool.
I want to help people increase their self-acceptance and compassion.
Mm,
Like it is truly my one mission. And storytelling memoir is just the most powerful way that I
mm,
have found. Like with my particular skill set and where I come from, the body of knowledge that I have, it's just the most powerful way that I know how to do it. But in the end, I love books. I love to see the authors that I work with publish, but that actually doesn't matter nearly as much to me as seeing when someone's ready to tell that story that they
mm,
have been, that's been like eating them up. Or to see when someone finds the new part of their story that they weren't looking at yet. Or when someone is able to look at something really painful and see for the first time, like, yeah, I don't like the way I acted in that situation. It's easy to judge myself in hindsight, but I know who I was then and I know why I did that.
mm,
Like even just that ability to kind of create a lasting thread through our lives that we don't have to divorce and shun and shame the people that we used to be, but bring them along with us to who we are now. Like that's my vision for every person.
so powerful. That word acceptance is a word that continues to teach me things. And when I was younger, I would have never thought that could be like whatever. But now I'm just like so much of my experience is what am I willing to accept? And I
Hmm.
could go on and on. So I love that answer. Wow, because it's so real. And I believe you're doing that. So props to you for leaning into that. It feels like what you're
Thank you.
doing would be way better than people investing in therapy. Like just go write a book with Emily
They're
and you'll
not
get way
replacements for
more
each
out of
other.
it.
They're definitely not replacements. I think that therapy is a really awesome thing to do alongside writing a memoir. I think writing a memoir is a really awesome thing to do alongside
Uh,
therapy. They get at things with different methods, and that's
hmm.
gonna, unlock different things for folks. So I'm certainly not saying we should all quit therapy and go write
No more
books,
therapies.
but I know it's helpful to write books.
That's fair. That's also modest. So I'll just say that what you're doing, yeah, great point. It doesn't replace any therapy, but it's definitely a form of healing, creativity, self-acceptance, all these things that you've noted. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I imagine at some point I will lean into more guidance and leadership from you, which is a
Oh, I
different
can't wait
discussion.
to
Yeah,
talk with you about your book. Yeah, that's amazing.
totally, totally. All right, few final rapid fire questions. You up for that?
Yeah.
Sweet. First one, what is Emily's favorite book? Yeah.
As you can imagine, like I have a list of, 1,000, right? I think the book that's been on my mind the most lately is Red Azalea by Angie Min, which
Oh.
I read back in high school. It was really big when it came out in the 90s, bestseller, New York Times bestseller list, all of that stuff. But it is a really incredible story. The author grew up in communist China during the Great
Hmm.
Leap Forward and writes very honestly and openly about her experience there. And it's just such an really beautiful account of fighting against indoctrination and
Hmm.
trying to find herself and her own desires and her own personhood, that I think has so much to teach all of us. So, yeah.
Wow. That sounds cool. That's new for me, so I'll probably check it out. Sweet. Second question, what is your favorite emotion? This
I
one's for you,
try
by the way.
so
Yeah.
hard not to have favorites.
Yeah, it forces
Because
you to
I
choose.
do. I do. And then I avoid the ones that aren't my favorites. I mean, joy is the easy answer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
um, I in particular, I in particular love that like overwhelming sad joy, like the
Mm,
joy that comes with just like, I don't know if I can hold the bigness of what this feels like right now. I'm
mm,
a big fan of that one. I feel like that also that when that one comes to my life, it always makes me grow in some pretty cool ways.
What a great answer. That reminds me, a couple months ago, I turned 40, and my wife surprised me by having a lot of people in my life record a video. And as I'm sitting on the couch watching the video with my wife, my kids, and a good friend that was visiting, I experienced what you just said. It was overwhelming joy, the sadness kind, and like within seconds, I'm just bawling and just letting it flow through me. Like this is so, um, it's amazing. It was humbling. It was just a gift. And yeah, it wasn't the normal type of joy, to your point.
Hmm.
It was this combination of like a little bit of sadness and a little bit of like so much love mixed in. So that's a really cool emotion. Final question. What is your favorite childhood memory? A lot of favorites here, if you haven't noticed the theme.
Oh, goodness. Hmm. I it's hard to pick a favorite, of course, but I think one that's been coming up to me because I've actually been writing about this moment was the first moment that I got glasses
Mm.
when I was 9 years old. And I am very, very farsighted. I'm like, without my glasses, I kind of can't even tell that you have a face. I can just tell that like there's some
Yeah.
dark patches that are probably your eyes. And so, up until 9 years old, I was wandering through the world that way and everything just
Mm.
looked blurry. And that was what I was used to. And I didn't know anything different. And then all of a sudden I failed a vision test at school and I have to go get glasses. And my dad, I remember he took me to pick up my new pair of glasses. And as we stepped out of the office, it was fall and there was like a dead leaf in the gutter, like all, just like whatever. It wasn't even a very pretty leaf. It was brown and all broken up. And I picked it up and I was like, look at, did you know that there's all of these lines everywhere. This whole thing, it's like I can see individual cells. I don't, I'm so, and I just literally, we stood on that street for like 10 minutes and I'm just having a conniption of joy over this dead broken leaf. And my dad, he's not a crier. It's the one of a very small number of times where I remember seeing tears in my dad's eyes. And I haven't asked him about that part of his experience, but I imagine that it's like he realized what my worlds look like and how much was opening
Mm.
up for the first time. Yeah.
Wow, what a cool memory for all kinds of reasons. And what I want to kind of reflect back to you as we wrap up here is that you have a gift for telling stories. Like I was so in there, and then I imagined little Emily with the glasses on, be like, "Dad, look!" and like showing her the leaf. Oh, that's so cool. Wow. Emily, this is a gift. All of our conversations are, so
Same.
thank you for creating space for this. Anything left unsaid?
No, I feel really, yeah, I love spending time with you. Thank you.
Likewise, yeah, I got an energy boost. Um, just your being around you got make I feel more creative. I feel more curious. I feel more connected. So this was really cool. Appreciate you.
I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.